G'day, guys. Welcome. As promised, I said I would make the 50-minute trek from Werribee to Carlton to Princes Park for the second viewing session. They had one a fortnight ago, and I think they've got another one on the 23rd of April, and this is going to become a consistent thing at the club. I think this is something that Graham Wright is really keen to introduce and get the fans to connect to this club on a different level. They're calling these viewing sessions rather than open training sessions, and are a lot more low-key in regards to how many fans are actually there. I mean, today there was no more than 150. It was a really good vibe. It was quite chilly. It started raining when the players first hit the track. It was only a bit of a sort of drizzle. They didn't train for a long time. This was definitely not the main session. I think that will come on Wednesday. They hit the track at around about 10:15. They would have done a fair bit of sort of warm-up stuff in the rooms before they came out, and I reckon they trained for no more than an hour and a half. And it was around about sort of three-quarter intensity. They never really hit top pace, and there was a clear difference between what the senior group were doing, and what I mean by the senior group, the players that played against Collingwood on Thursday night, compared to what the VFL boys did in this training session, considering that they played on Saturday night. It was almost like the VFL boys did the first sort of three rotation sort of warm-up stuff, which went for about 15 minutes, so 5 minutes each rotation. And they were in their own group. And then they went off and did their own thing, whether that was a little bit of extra craft work or went indoors. So that was sort of kind of like blowing the cobwebs out. But this was, from what I gather, this is why it's good to go to these sessions. This looked like a bit of an education session for the senior boys, and it was good to see. It was good to see. They were relatively upbeat, very positive, particularly in the last drill they were doing, which was called stoppage chains. They were up and about, and the vibe was good, and most of the players are accounted for. I'll go through that shortly. I get the sense that the main session will come this week on Wednesday, and then the players and the coaches and all the staff will fly out Thursday to Adelaide. They have their captain's run on Friday in Adelaide. I'm not quite sure where that is being held. Is that at the Adelaide Oval or Glenelg or one of those types of grounds? I'm not quite sure. And then they are flying back straight after the game on Saturday, so they're not hanging around for the gather round for any of the festivities. As soon as the game's finished against the West Coast Eagles, that game's at around about 1:30, I think, they'll go straight to the airport and come back to Melbourne. Not quite sure whether the Camporelli twins and Ashton Moyer, whether they'll be playing this week, whether they go over as in the touring party, so to speak. Whether they'll spend a few days at home, a few extra days at home, I'm not quite sure. Anyway, some of the players who you might be interested in regards to just their overall health and where they're at. This is just an observation rather than knowing exactly where they're at. I mean, as I said, this was by no means a session where you're watching the players go full throttle. It was half pace to three-quarter pace. I'll start with Alex Cincotta. He was out there for the whole time, but it was a mixture of sort of stuff for him. He'd do a little bit of leading work, a little bit of running, a little bit of skills, but nothing which I could get a gauge on in regards to how far he's away. He looks relatively strong. He looks relatively fit, but he has had that sort of hip concern. And I'm sure the club will put out a statement during the week in regards to the injury list and where Alex Cincotta sits. I'd love to be there on Wednesday to see the full training session or the main training session, just to see where someone like Alex Cincotta and also Mark Pitnett, who I sort of put in the same bracket. I think Pitnet, who I'll mention now, is further advanced. He did a little bit more than Chincotta in regards to intensity, but once the VFL boys split from the senior players who played on Thursday night, Pitnet went with the VFL boys, so he didn't actually train with the senior fellows who played on Thursday night. Lockie Cowan, he's back running already. I did hear on the radio on the way home that it's upwards of a 6-week injury for his hamstring, which sounds kind of serious, but he's already running. Now, I know this is common practice now with hamstring injuries. I mean, if they're not sort of ripped off the bone, then they can begin running pretty much 24 hours after they do it. And he seemed to be running quite freely, but it was very low intensity. Some strides and then some lap work. He did cut a quite a forlorn figure training by himself, which is disappointing for him. He hasn't been in great form, but yeah, someone's going to have to come in and take his spot. It'll be interesting to see who that is, who they've got in mind. Whether it's a Matthew Carroll, whether it is a Jordan Boyd, we're just going to have to wait for Thursday to see team selections. Nick Newman was a bit of a surprise to me. He was out there doing some running. It wasn't high speed running, but there was no sign of any tape on the knee. There was no limp. He looked to be moving quite freely. That has to be a bit of a positive thing, considering that was a nasty patella injury he had. They sort of liken nasty patella injuries to ACL. So he's already up, back and running. Matthew Cottrell's the interesting one. Now, I don't reckon he's moving that well. Like it's an ankle injury. He went off to the Legends stand, leaped the fence. Well, he didn't leap the fence, but you know what I mean. He went over the fence up into the Legends stand and did a series of runs up and down the stairs. And he probably did that for around about 6 or 7 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, and then spent the rest of the time in the stands actually watching the players train, then jumped back over the fence and then went into the rooms. Hudson O'Keefe, who played his first game back, I reckon, for a long time, on the weekend in the VFL on Saturday night. Now, he didn't train. He didn't do any of the sort of skill work with the VFL boys who played in the VFL, that is. He did a little bit of running away from them. And I must admit, he didn't look great. But if that's his first game back for some time and he's had those hammy concerns, I can understand the caution with him. And I reckon he was sore, really sore, because he basically played the whole game on Saturday night against a brute of opponent in Crosley. So I'm hoping he hasn't had any reoccurrence of those hammy concerns, and it's just more a sort of modified thing for him and a week-to-week thing regarding just sort of easing his load after games. But he looks sore. He just looks sore. Charlie Curnow came out. I think I saw him. A lot of players wore the long sleeves in this session. It was a little bit chilly. He came out, then went inside and never saw him again. So yeah, that I don't know. I don't know what that means. Razio Fantasia the same. Came out for about 2 minutes and then disappeared. Harry Lemmy, similar to Hudson O'Keefe actually. He came out but did absolutely nothing. Sort of just stood around. So he was part of the VFL team that played on Saturday night. Mentioned Mark Pitnet already. Matt Duffy, who's been a long time in the rehab group with that ACL he did last year. He's the Irishman. He did a power work. He did a fair bit of running, fair bit of the skill work, and then worked away from the group for, I reckon, about a half an hour with VFL reserves coach and development coach Luke Power, particularly with his kicking. And I reckon they've got maybe a kicking coach there as well, because then Lucas Camporelli came over and he was working with Luke Power and this mystery kicking coach as well. So that was good to see those two boys doing some extra work on their kicking. What they did, I mentioned the 3 groups, 3 rotations, 5 minutes each. Then they split. The senior players then did what's known as line connection. Now, you're probably wondering, how do I know that? Because they put it up on the scoreboard. So there was some defensive groups transitioning the ball out of the back half to the midfield. And then the other line was the midfield kicking the ball inside forward 50. What I noticed with the line connection, guys, was that Sam Walsh he actually was training for a period of time with the defenders, not the midfield group. Sam Walsh. Interesting. Okay. Then they went into probably the main skill, or the main activity, the main drill they did was called stoppage chains. And they just basically went to different parts of the ground, and they were really working on their stoppage sort of work, the clean hands inside. There was sort of low-key defensive pressure with that. And then it was about trying to bring that ball, if they could, into the corridor. And we had the likes of Ashton Moyer and also Brady Kemp leading out from the goal square. Anyway, it was really good to get along and watch this, guys. It really was. And what it all means, I'm not quite sure, but the vibe was excellent down at the club. Rather positive. So can that translate into some more positive form come Saturday? We're just going to have to wait and see. Anyway, I'll have a VFL report out tomorrow. Take care.
It's all right to say.